New York is a city that knows how to create legends, but it also knows how to destroy them. Here, people go from heroes to villains in the blink of an eye, and stories that start out beautifully can always end in scandal. This time, the victim was Robert De Niro. What initially seemed like a minor piece of news turned into a full-blown media storm within hours. His old acquaintance, restaurateur William Bill Sutter, had suddenly passed away. He was a man well known in certain bohemian and business circles. His restaurants had been frequented by celebrities, politicians, and cultural influencers. He wasn't just a restaurant owner, he was part of the very soul of Manhattan. And now, he was gone. But the biggest shock wasn't his death. It was something else entirely. According to his will, his entire grand mansion in the heart of New York, a neoclassical masterpiece worth tens of millions, was left to Robert De Niro. That news sent the whole city into an uproar. Why him? Everyone asked. What even connected them? This has to be some kind of scam. The tabloids wasted no time digging into it. The friendship between the actor and the restaurateur was put under a microscope. Yes, they had been close once. But in recent years, they had barely seen each other. De Niro hadn't set foot in Sutter's restaurants for ages, and their names hadn't been mentioned together in the press. So where did this extravagant gesture come from? Greedy old De Niro, he always wants more money, bloggers wrote. Sutter was forced to sign that will. There was no official evidence of foul play, but that didn't stop people's imaginations from running wild. Journalists started searching for dirt on the actor. Some speculated that he had secretly invested in Sutter's business and was simply reclaiming his share. Others claimed it was a long-standing deal they had made years ago. De Niro remained silent. His agents urged him to make a public statement, but he ignored them. Friends called to offer support, but he wouldn't pick up. Photos surfaced in the media, De Niro walking down the street, head down, looking exhausted. He knows he's guilty, social media users claimed. He's hiding. The scandal snowballed. TV analysts, many of whom had never met De Niro or Sutter, spoke with absolute certainty, calling it corruption, saying massive amounts of money were involved, demanding the district attorney's office step in. Anonymous letters started arriving at De Niro's home, calling him a fraud. Protesters appeared outside his building, waving signs that read, "De Niro, give the house back." He couldn't understand how it had escalated this far. He never asked for this inheritance. He hadn't even known Sutter had mentioned him in his will. But the verdict was already in, guilty. And the strangest part? No one understood why he even wanted the house. He didn't move in. He didn't throw parties. He didn't try to sell it. The mansion sat empty, like a ghost from the past. And that only fueled more speculation. Long before he became a Hollywood legend, Robert De Niro was just a kid growing up in the cramped apartments of the Lower East Side. He grew up with the smell of hot asphalt, the shouts of street vendors, and the ever-present whisper of danger that lingers in big cities. But in the middle of all that chaos, there was one place he remembered more clearly than anything else. A small theater on the outskirts of the neighborhood, where amateur actors performed for people who couldn't afford Broadway tickets. The theater was old and worn out, like it had fought too hard to stay alive, but inside, it was always full of life. That was where, in a dimly lit auditorium, he first witnessed the magic of film and theater. The person who had taken him there was none other than Bill Sutter, not the restaurateur, not the wealthy businessman, but just a neighborhood kid who lived one floor above him. Bill was a few years older than Robert, and to the young boy, he seemed like a magician. He knew everyone in the neighborhood, could talk his way into a free movie, and always had a few coins to buy little De Niro a chocolate bar from the corner shop. "You're gonna love this." "Bobby," Bill had said, wiping blood from his face after yet another fight with the local bullies. "This movie's different. You'll forget all about this crappy neighborhood." They sat in the half-empty theater, where the overhead lights flickered and the wooden chairs creaked with every movement. But the moment the film began, all of that disappeared. And for the first time, young Robert understood what real magic was. "You're not going to spend your whole life in these dark stairwells, right?" Bill asked after the movie. I don't know," the boy shrugged. "Nah, you're going to be somebody. You'll see." Bill clapped him on the shoulder. "You just have to find your place." Those words stayed with him forever. Years passed, and they both changed. Bill grew up, built his own business, and found success in the restaurant industry. Robert took a different path, the path of film, theater, and fame. They saw each other less and less, their lives pulling them in opposite directions. But deep down, De Niro never forgot that day in the little theater. He remembered the moment he first realized that the stage wasn't just a place for performances, it was a chance to live other lives, to tell stories that could change the world. Bill hadn't forgotten either. It was only after his death that Robert began to understand just how important those memories had been for both of them. What had seemed like nothing more than a beautiful episode from the past was actually the beginning of a much bigger mystery. It was leading him to something greater, something that could change not just his life but the future of so many others. The scandal didn't die down. People kept attacking, judging, demanding answers. The streets of Manhattan were buzzing with talk about De Niro, but no one cared about the truth. They only cared about the spectacle, the drama, another chance to tear down a legend. He could at least say something. The talking heads raged on TV. If he's innocent, why isn't he defending himself? Reporters followed him everywhere, outside his home, on the streets, in restaurants where he tried to eat in peace. Cameras tracked his every move, waiting to capture a moment of weakness. But he stayed silent, not because he had anything to hide, but because an explanation would only make sense once everything was ready. Because this whole story, ugly, suspicious, unfair, was nothing like people imagined it to be. The night he learned about the will, Robert sat in his study for hours, sifting through old, yellowed documents. Among them was a single note, short, written in Bill's shaky, almost frail handwriting. "Bobby, this house was always too big for me. Do something good with it." And that's when it clicked. This wasn't a gift. It was his friend's final wish. And the only way to honor it was to endure the storm of hatred, to stay silent until the truth spoke for itself. De Niro hadn't accepted the mansion to live in it. He hadn't sold it, hadn't used it for his own benefit. The answer was much simpler. He was turning that enormous house into an acting school for kids from low-income families. The same kind of kids he and Bill once were. Kids who would never be able to afford elite academies. Kids who, right now, might be sitting in dark apartments in the Lower East Side, never imagining that their futures could be different. That's why he refused interviews. That's why he kept his plans quiet. He knew that once the truth came out, the same people who screamed the loudest would quickly move on to their next target. But the best response to hatred is action. Classrooms were being built, teachers were being hired, a curriculum was being developed. And soon, the doors of that mansion didn't open for De Niro. They opened for those who needed a chance at a future. And that's when everything fell into place.